Greetings. We are at the end of the 6th week of Eastertide, and by my count, the 10th week of quarantine to control the spread of the coronavirus. And we are beginning to look for safe ways to return to our outer lives. The disciples, too, even if they were unaware, according to the book of Acts, were just 10 days from their coming out at Pentecost. The Spirit came, and they brought their new understanding of reality to the city, teeming with visitors and residents. But there was one last step, according to Acts, the replacement of Judas. The disciples had, after the ascension, had returned to their home in Jerusalem. They gathered in the upper room to await the promised Spirit. And Peter addressed the group. He said they needed to replace Judas, who, quote, who became a guide for those who arrested Jesus. His death somehow left the apostles incomplete, or at least they thought. His share of the ministry would be lacking without a complete 12. They determined criteria for those who would be considered, nominated 2 people, and in the end chose one by casting lots. I would imagine there was considerable discussion and debate, possibly even conflict, as they arrived at this conclusion. So being chosen. We all, I guess, at some time or another want to be chosen for a job, a special place at the table, an award, membership on the team. And at times we're successful, and at times we fail. I wonder how many of us remember the times we failed more so than the times we were chosen. I remember when I was in high school, I wanted above everything else to be a cheerleader. Now, by most people's standards, I was a very successful high school student. I was the valedictorian of my class and won enough awards to fill a gold bracelet. But that was not what I wanted. I wanted to be a cheerleader, but I failed. From hindsight, it's obvious that I didn't have the physical attributes or the requisite popularity to be chosen. But that took a long while to sink in. I wonder how Joseph Barsabbas, the one not chosen by the gathered followers, must have felt. We also do a lot of choosing every day, and we are faced now with choices about who will lead us, whom we will trust, what we will do personally and collectively as we struggle with life with the specter of COVID-19. The gathered followers of Jesus in the upper room considered how they would pick a new member of the 12. They established criteria. One might suspect they also debated and discussed. Finally, they agreed that the one chosen should have been with Jesus throughout his whole ministry and a witness to the resurrection. They chose 2 possibilities, 2 candidates. We too rightly consider what are the parameters and important characteristics of our leaders, what policies we think are essential, what are the criteria for good decisions. We evaluate carefully the various options, and then we decide. The early followers of Jesus made their choice by casting lots. That, I imagine, seems rather strange to us and unlikely to pick the best candidate. We indeed prefer voting with majority rule or discussing until we reach a consensus. But by using fate, the principal element seen in casting lots, I suspect the disciples felt this was a way to let God make the final decision. I do think that is important for us to seek God's involvement in all of our decision making. We as Christian people believe that following Christ in all that we do is the road to a true life. And as we individually think about what we will do going forward, Perhaps we will pray for guidance and look to the teachings of Jesus as the basis for our choice. As a group, we ask that God guide us and seek to discern God's will in the choices that we make. That ingredient, indeed, I think, is critical as we make choices going forward in the light of the pandemic. In the face of a polarized society, perhaps we need to remember that Christ was sent to save the whole world, all of it, as is written in John 3. Perhaps we need to remember that along with rights, we have responsibilities, and consider what Jesus means for us when he said we should love our neighbors as ourselves. And as the disciples struggled with understanding what the crucifixion and resurrection meant for those of their time, we too can struggle as individuals and groups with the meaning of the idea that God, who is love, in Christ Jesus died to cause that love to make us whole. We do have significant choices to make, and we have opportunities to see anew if we wish. God, I think, always wants us to respond to God's love in ways that bring that love to fruition throughout the whole universe, both animate and inanimate parts. And sometimes tragedy helps us to see more clearly. May indeed this be one of those times. So blessings, stay safe, love your neighbor, and live life to the fullest.